In the last lesson, I showed you how to use EQ in a mix. In this lesson, I'll introduce you to filters and how to use them while DJing. Basically, filters do the same thing as EQs. They can be used to sculpt the sound of a track. On the DDJ-SB2, you have a filter for each deck. This filter works two ways. If you move it clockwise, the filter removes the low end from a track. This is called a high-pass filter because it only lets the high frequencies pass through. If you move it anti-clockwise, the filter removes the highs from a track. This is called a low-pass filter because it only lets the low frequencies pass through. The most commonly used filter is a high-pass filter. You can use it when mixing two tracks, just like using the low-frequency EQ knob to roll off the lows. As you blend your next track in, you can move the filter knob of that deck clockwise so the bass gets filtered out. As you continue to move the crossfader over onto the next deck, you can begin backing off the filter by moving it back to its default 12 o'clock position to bring back those low frequencies. Let's try that out right now. In the last video, we talked about EQs and one way to use them to make our mix smoother. In this video, we'll talk about filters. Basically, filters do the same thing as EQs. They can be used to sculpt the sound of a track. On the DDJ-SB2, you have a filter for each deck. This filter works two ways. If you move it clockwise, the filter removes the low end from a track. This is called a high-pass filter because it only lets the high frequencies pass through. If you move it anti-clockwise, the filter removes the highs from a track. This is called a low-pass filter because it only lets the low frequencies pass through. The most commonly used filter is a high-pass filter, and you can use it when mixing two tracks, just like using the low-frequency EQ knob. As you blend your next track in, you can move the filter knob of that deck clockwise so the bass gets filtered out. As you continue to move the crossfader over onto the next deck, you can begin backing off the filter by moving it back to its default 12 o'clock position to bring back those low frequencies. Let's try that right now. So I've got the two same tracks here, and I'm going to try mixing them together. This time, I'm going to be using the high-pass filter instead of the low frequency knob. Let's go. Play. All right. Line up the beats. There we are. And then now, I'm going to use the filter knob. I'm going to move it clockwise while I move the crossfader from left to right. Here we go. There we are. So as you can hear on the right deck, no low frequencies here. And then I'm gonna move the crossfader all the way to the right, slowly bringing back those bass frequencies. Left to right, right, left. There we are. Okay, cool. So far we've looked at two ways to remove bass frequencies when we mix to create smoother blends. First is by rolling off the lows using the low EQ knob, and then by using the filter knob to filter out the lows. When should we use one or the other? The answer lies in the sound that you're going for. Removing lows using the low EQ is a bit more transparent because all you're doing is rolling off frequencies and you're not adding anything to it. Let me play this track back so you can have an idea of what I mean. So if I were to remove the frequencies using the low knob, this is how it sounds like. Basically, we're just removing those low frequencies. I'm gonna bring that back in. Now, removing lows using the high-pass filter sounds a bit more colored because while the filter rolls off frequencies, it also adds in some frequencies of its own. You can hear a slight difference in them. Let's try that right now. So this time, I'm going to use the filter and I'm going to move it clockwise. Yes, so you can hear that slight difference in there. The filter sounds a bit sharper, like there's an added frequency bump as you move the filter knob clockwise. It sounds like there's a whooshing sound even. And you just don't get that kind of sound when you're rolling off the lows using the low frequency knob. Even with it turned all the way down, you don't get that whooshing or that sharp sound that you get with a filter. See that again? Yeah, so it's just a totally different sound effect, basically. Now, so far, we've covered using the high-pass filter, but you can also use a low-pass filter, although this isn't as commonly used in the middle of a mix. If you move it anti-clockwise, you're basically removing all the high frequencies. This could be used as an effect, maybe like if you'd want to reduce the level of excitement on a dance floor by cutting out the treble frequencies, you can use the filter for that effect. But generally for mixing, it's the high-pass filter that you're going to want to use. Now, before we end, I want to show you quickly a special feature of the DDJ-SB2. It's called filter fade, and what it does is it applies a high-pass filter to both decks automatically as you move the crossfader from one deck to another. It saves you from having to move the crossfader and the filter knob at the same time, so you can focus on beat matching and moving the crossfader. Here's an example of how it works. So I'm going to move the fader again to the left deck, going to remove this loop, and we're going to try mixing these two tracks again, this time with filter fade enabled, and I enable it by pressing the on button over here. When it's flashing, that means that filter fade is on. Let's go. Right, now, gonna beat match this, right, beats are lined up. Now I'm gonna move the fader from the left to the right. Notice how the filter works automatically. When I've got the crossfader set to the middle and both tracks are playing and coming out of the master speakers at the same level, you can hear that there's almost no low end. And that's because the filters for both of these decks are automatically engaged. And if I move the crossfader all the way to the right, you can hear some of that bass begin to roll back in until finally you've got all of the frequencies of this deck on the right playing. That's it. I just showed you how filters work, when you should use them, and how the filter fade effect on the DDJ-SB2 works. In the next lesson, I'll show you how to tempo match two tracks without using the sync button. I'll see you then.